Hi, I'm Alice, creator of the Light Up podcast series, and today I wanted to introduce myself and share a bit about the journey that led me to create this podcast, mostly because many of you have asked me. So, if you've been following the series, thank you very much for being here. I didn't think it would be challenging to do a video recording for YouTube, but I must tell you, it is. I have restarted trying to record this more than 20 times, and it is quite a different experience to speak to my phone with no one else on the other end. So please let me know if you want me to do more of these videos. Considering I have not posted a video on YouTube with the second story of Limes and Lemons for many months, I wanted to start off this year as my gift to you, which is still keeping connected here on YouTube by sharing weekly videos and giving you more information that can help you along your journey. I cannot believe that it's been almost a year since I launched my podcast, and I'm truly grateful for all the support that you've been providing and the encouragement throughout the time that I started my podcast. Many of you live in different countries from around the world, which means we all live in different time zones. So if you're new to my channel, welcome. I know that you are excited to hear the stories that I share, and I'm so excited to have you join me today as I reflect on how all of this started and also share with you some information on where it's heading. I'll also talk about the 2 near-death experiences that changed everything for me, and also include some insight about the purpose that's fueling my podcast. Can you imagine that it took me 2 near-death experiences to finally gain the courage to create the Light Up podcast series? I know, it's unbelievable, but that's true. The first of these experiences was back in 2017 when I was in a major 4-vehicle collision, and that one left me in years of pain, physical pain. Every step of recovery was extremely challenging, and that's when I learned something quite shocking, which is basically that there are people driving on the roads who should never be allowed to drive. But that experience also taught me about how fragile life truly is. And it also taught me how much our health impacts our happiness. And I'm not talking about the knowledge I learned about in any school. I'm talking about the knowledge that I started learning myself about my own health and my own healing. Then in 2023, I had my second major car accident, and that's something that I'm still working through. That experience was really challenging though, because it was good and not so good in many ways, and I'll explain. When that happened, I couldn't, and I actually still cannot believe that the physical pains that I had in 2017, which had healed for a few months in 2023, had returned. But they were 1,000 times more, because while I was grateful and still am grateful to be in one piece, it was overwhelming to exist as a human. This is because I experienced excruciating muscle pains, which made life extremely difficult and unbearable for me at times. Can you imagine that breathing hurt, which meant that every breath I took was so painful, especially when I breathed out, because I didn't know how our upper body uses its muscles to contract and relax, which was something that I never felt before. Even sitting and standing and walking were extremely unbearable. And I couldn't even wear basic women's clothing like I'm wearing now, because it was so excruciating to wear clothing because of how sensitive my muscles were. And here's another thing. That's how I learned that there's no machine or technology that exists on our planet which is capable of recording or even identifying such pain. And to even find a pain specialist, which is a job that I didn't even know existed until last year, is still a waiting game because it seems like they are much rarer to find than the rarest Pokemon. I can laugh now, but can you imagine having to live a year without laughing? Or even tell people you interact with, please stop making me laugh because it's painful? Well, that was the reality of my life in 2024 and some of 2023. And I couldn't believe that there are over 500,000 search entries on funny videos. It got to points in time where I felt trapped in my own body, with every movement feeling like a painful reminder of how much I had lost. But it was also during that period when I couldn't do much physically that I decided to start creating something and make it meaningful. And this is when I remembered I had an idea from many years ago. See, back in 2015, I had visited an Apple store to learn how to use GarageBand. And when the instructor asked everyone why we wanted to learn this technology, I said I want to start a podcast. But at that time, I had no clue what it would be about. And for a long time, I didn't have the courage to follow through. So the idea stayed in the back of my mind, and then I completely forgot about it. Many years passed, and all I had was the little mic that I had bought from the Apple store. But after my second car accident, I realized that life is too short to wait for the perfect time. So I decided then that I needed to act now, even if I was scared. And to be honest, I'm still a little bit shy to be on camera, but here I am, showing up to introduce myself to you. And on February 14th, 2024, I finally launched the Light Up podcast series. My podcast started as a way to help my friends improve their English and also capture the information I enjoy learning. At the same time, it gave me something to focus on while I was healing. And I know some of you have told me that it is a little bit too slow for you to listen to the stories that I share. But see, during the pandemic lockdowns, I had revisited my love for learning languages. And travel wasn't allowed back then, so I decided to travel across cultures through knowledge. And that's when I started teaching English as a hobby. And this is how I have structured the stories that I share in my podcast for my listeners who are learning English. In fact, one of the individuals who lives in Spain kept asking me for more of my audio messages, and I laughed when he told me that he listened to them like podcast episodes because I was just repeating words in English so that he could listen and practice. For example, I would repeat words in English that contained the letter R in the spelling so that he could practice how to say those words. Sometimes there's an R at the beginning and the middle and the end of English words. And that experience reminded me how much I love inspiring others to learn and grow. Another reason is that many people often don't get the opportunity to go to school, and so sharing the information in a way that they can also enjoy is a way for me to encourage learning and also share stories we may not know about. And considering my other friends live in different countries and different time zones, it meant that some of them, including myself, do not always have time available to practice our languages. So, paired with my need to be creative during my recovery and also keep my mind active while healing, which is still ongoing, by the way, I found a way to distract me from worrying all the time about the excruciating pains I was living with. So my podcast was born. Also, because I love cooking. and I love food. We all have to eat. It's truly hard to believe that it's been almost a year since I launched the Light Up podcast series, but creating this podcast has been one of the most challenging and at the same time, one of the most rewarding things that I have ever experienced, because each episode reflects a piece of my journey through pain, recovery, and rediscovery. But I want to share something real with you, which you may or may not relate to. There were so many moments of self-doubt along my journey that I delayed things I wanted to do because I told myself I wasn't ready, or that I didn't have enough resources, or that it wasn't the right time. And that's on top of the comments and opinions of other people who I only realized were not experts in providing advice, no matter how well-meaning. So it took me almost dying twice to realize something that changed everything, which is dreaming is free. It doesn't cost me anything to dream except my own time to focus on what I truly want instead of what anyone else thinks I should want. And that realization gave me the courage to stop waiting for the perfect time. So I started dreaming boldly, even if I didn't have all the answers or all the resources. For example, when I started recording my first 3 podcast episodes, I used my MacBook Air I had from 10 years ago until it almost died on me because I almost completely lost my last episode before I even got to publish it. I also had to record my episodes late into the night while standing in my little closet, which was not ideal since that's how I learned about the extremely dry air in closets, which makes speaking to record the stories and also staying hydrated quite the balancing act. It was also quite challenging to hold the equipment quite steady because I was still in a lot of pain. But I wanted to ensure that I provided you with the highest quality audio that I could produce, ensuring that you could hear the clearest sound when listening to the stories. Now, I know you may be wondering, why was there not another space I could use? Well, it's because I have very disruptive neighbors who are only quiet when they sleep, which meant that I could not record anytime I wanted without noise interruptions. And just like many of you, juggling work among many other things actually meant that I had to use the time I had available, which meant my late nights. I'll tell you, it wasn't ideal, but I was determined to make it work, and so I did. I know the audio quality is not perfect yet, but that's going to be improved in my next episode. For a long time, I thought that because I came from very humble beginnings, it meant that my dreams were out of reach. But what I've realized is that it's not about what you don't have. It's about what you make use of with what you do have. And that's the perspective that has shaped everything I've done, including creating this podcast. For most of my life, I let self-doubt hold me back. But I decided to stop waiting and start dreaming again. So that's what brought me here. Being my own tech support, though, has its interesting moments, but I want you to know that I will continue to create them for you. Just please remember, I'm doing this on my free time, which is limited. Maybe someday I'll be able to do this all the time. But until that happens, I'll release the stories when I have them ready, and I hope that's okay. So no matter where you are in your own journey, I hope that my story inspires you to dream as much as you want. And as I continue working on new podcast episodes, I'll share other content with you, such as the start of weekly videos like this one. Each week, we'll explore themes that focus on storytelling, culture, personal growth, and so much more. My videos are designed to spark your curiosity, provide you with fresh perspectives, and help you uncover the beauty in everyday life. My goal is to bring you meaningful content that sparks your curiosity and offers you new ways to see the world. If my story resonates with you, I'd love for you to be a part of this journey. Subscribe to stay in the loop with future videos and let me know in the comments what you're excited to explore. One of my listeners already shared how the first part of the Limes and Lemons trilogy, yes, it's a trilogy, because I have 2 more parts of the story to share with you. And that one listener told me how the story inspired him to dive into learning about the world of nutrition. In fact, he was so motivated that he read 2 books on the topic, and I've also added those books to my own reading list. He also told me about how the story I shared made him reflect on a recent cruise he'd been on, because it made him see that cruise experience in a new light. Hearing that made me so happy because it's a reminder of why I create these stories. It's always fascinating to hear about all the diverse connections they spark. Like another listener who shared after he listened to my podcast episode on grapes, he had grapes for dessert that day. And he also shared about his country's tradition related to grapes, which I will share in my next podcast episode. So yes, I'm already working on the second part of Limes and Lemons. If you haven't listened to it already, I would encourage you to check it out because it's quite the story. So it was these listener stories, along with all the other stories I heard from my other listeners, which made me reflect on my own journey. And I know that my energy and constant smiling might make it seem like I'm always happy, but that's not always the case. See, there have been many moments when I've cried. So many that I've lost count. And there were times when life itself felt overwhelming with every breath, and self-doubt was always right there in the background, often creeping into the foreground. But here's the thing, I've realized that this is the one life I get. So I choose to smile, not because everything is perfect, but because I want to see the beauty in each and every day, no matter how small. So I hope you will find those moments in your own life too, because it's not about having all the answers. It's about finding joy in the little things, combined with daring to dream about what's possible. Because, again, dreaming is free and can be done anytime. So thank you for being here. I'm so excited for what's ahead, and I'm thrilled to share more with you along the way. Always remember, your dreams matter, and I hope that my story inspires you to take that first step, no matter how small. Together, let's light up our minds and our hearts, one story at a time, because it's not just about sharing my story, it's about inspiring yours. And if you think that there's a team of people helping me create all of my content, then this is why I am sharing my story with you, because I'm the creator of all the content that you see. I write the scripts, I narrate the stories, I add the sounds, I edit them, and I create all the imagery. It would be an impossible task if I had to do all of this myself. But we live in a world today where we have access to the artificial intelligence that have been created for us. And for me, using them has been quite the experience. It can be extremely frustrating, and it can be extremely rewarding, and it can also be funny, because sometimes when I'm trying to create the vision for the story, it can be a bit challenging, but I do them, and I don't have a team of people, but I do use the help of my AI friends. So I encourage you to tell me, what's one dream you've been holding on to that you haven't started yet? Because I'd love to hear about it. And this is an example of one dream that I am bringing to life so that you could see, no matter how small or how big your dream is, you just need to start. So let me know in the comments what's one dream you have which you haven't started yet. Until next time, have a spectacular day and a wonderful week. Your friendly and versatile storyteller, Alice.